Do you know anyone who uses Arch Linux? Trust me, if you did, they'd let you know. Today, we'll show you how you can get started as a beginner with BlackArch Linux on this episode of Cyber Weapons Lab. Kali Linux is often the first choice of beginners, and this is because the operating system is straightforward, based on Debian, which is shared with Ubuntu, so a lot of the commands are familiar, and also has a lot of online community support for if you get stuck or run into problems. Now, the same is not true of Arch, because this is meant for generally more advanced people who want a minimalistic experience that's still powerful. Now, for beginners, the lack of configuration options and the minimal desktop layout might be a little bit confusing. So today, we're going to introduce Manjaro Linux as an overlay, which will then import the BlackArch repositories so we get all the tools that we need. Basically, what we'll be doing is creating a virtual machine of Manjaro Linux and then pulling in all of the different tools we need from BlackArch without needing to install it and just have kind of the minimal overlay. And this will allow even a beginner to be able to use it as kind of a daily driver desktop system, full of stability and full of basically functional tools that allow it to be a little more than just a hacking distribution. Now, in order to do this, you'll need Virtualbox, and you'll be able to download the image files that we need from the various websites we'll direct you to in the Null Byte article linked in the description. Once you have Virtualbox set up and ready to go, then we can begin. To jump into using Arch Linux, we'll first need to download it. And again, we're going to be using a more user-friendly version that's called Manjaro. Now, we're going to be referencing this awesome Null Byte article that was written by Tokyo Neon. And this is, again, one of my favorite builds because it makes it super easy for beginners to be able to understand how all this stuff works. Now, a disadvantage of just using straight up Arch is the fact that it can be really intimidating for beginners, and for the sake of simplicity, we're going to go ahead and do this in a virtual machine so that we don't need to do anything that's too crazy, like installing it on a hard drive and potentially selecting the wrong partition or something. So one thing you'll need to do is download Virtualbox, which you can do pretty easily, and I'm going to assume you already have it because once you download it, it doesn't really require much to set up, you just install it. Here you can see I have several virtual machines already, and today we can use the terminal in order to download this. We can open a terminal window and just paste this command in from the, let me first CD to the desktop. Paste this command in from the article, and I'll make this a little larger because you guys keep asking for that. Hopefully that's easier to read. Even more, there you go. So once we run this command, it's going to download the current version of Manjaro for 64-bit. And as you can see, it would normally take a little bit. I'm going to cancel it because I've already downloaded it. And once this finishes downloading, you should have this disk image on your computer, just like this. So if I look at that, you can see it's 1.79 gigabytes. It's nice and small. And we're going to use this user-friendly operating system to go ahead and actually weaponize it so we can use all the fun Arch repositories. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. First, we are going to select the, again, type of system we're going to use. And if you're downloading this manually, you'll notice that there's a couple different types. There's the XFCE, there's the KDE, and there's the GNOME, different displays. And I recommend XFCE because it is light on resources and the other two tend to take up more. So a laptop with constrained resources will run just fine on XFCE, whereas KDE or GNOME can run a little bit more resource intensive. So let's go ahead and download that. And once we have the correct disk image we're going to use, we can open our Virtualbox. And we're going to create a new disk image, or a new virtual machine. So we'll name this Manjaro. And we're going to set our memory size to something over 1024 megabytes. And it doesn't really matter. I'm going to do it substantially more. We'll also create a virtual hard drive now. And the size of this really depends. I'm going to set mine to, let's see, maybe 50. And then this is going to be a VDI, so a VirtualBox disk image. and it's going to be dynamically allocated, which means it'll get larger and smaller depending on how much we need. This is a little bit slower than a fixed size, but it won't take up any more space than it actually needs on our hard disk, which is really useful if we don't have that much space on our hard drive. Now, once we've done this, we'll need to go into the settings here, and under the storage, we'll need to basically add an optical drive that is the Manjaro disk image that we have here. So we'll go ahead and add one. Oops. Add optical drive. Choose disk. And then we'll select the one that we just put on our desktop here. After that, we'll just click OK. And we should be able to start the virtual machine. We'll go ahead and go to Boots. And this should go ahead and start up Manjaro. There we go, we booted into Manjaro, so we'll go ahead and click on Launch Installer. And once this loads, we'll just go ahead and follow the prompts to set up the system. So here, we'll go ahead and select our virtual hard drive. We will erase the entire disk and proceed from there. Here we'll, for now, select to log in automatically without using a password, and we're going to use the same password for our administrator account, at least for now. Again, you might want to do some better security if you're going to be using the system a lot. All right, so now we'll finally confirm that it's about to make changes to our disk in order to install, and click on Install Now. So this installation process will run for a while, and once it's complete, we'll need to reboot the system in order to get it ready so that we're actually we're booting from the hard drive rather than booting from the disk image that we added earlier. Once we do that, we'll be able to actually weaponize the system by bringing in all the nice Arch repositories that have all the fun tools that we're looking for. All right, now we can go ahead and restart our system, but first I'm actually going to click Done, and I'm going to power down the system first. And the reason for this is so that hopefully, let's see, there it is. There we go. Hopefully I can remove the optical drive that we added before and boot directly from the disk rather than booting from that optical drive. Now a user, oops, no, I didn't want to do that. A user in the Null Byte article actually pointed this out, so I'm going to go ahead and do it just to make sure that we're booting from the correct drive. So here, I'll go ahead and remove this. And then let's go ahead and restart our virtual machine. We'll go ahead and boot into Manjaro Linux. And now you can see it boots a little bit differently, and that's because we are now doing this from the hard drive rather than from the disk image. And there we go. Now, I love Manjaro because it is fast, responsive, and it does everything that Arch does, but with kind of a beginner-friendly skin over it. So you can really do just about anything really quickly with Manjaro, especially if you're already familiar with something like Debian. Now, here I need to show you guys a little bit of what's different, and one of the things that's different about this is the fact that it uses a different package manager. Now, the Pacman package manager is pretty cool because unlike apt install, you can just type pacman tac-s for sync, and then whatever tool you want, and generally it'll run out and fetch it. Now, I would do something like aircrackng. Oh, and of course I have to be root. One thing that people used to give me flack for always sudoing stuff, and that's because I used to use Manjaro, and you gotta do that a lot. There we go. So here you can see that's how we go ahead and do an installation. Now it might actually have this, and that's pretty cool, but the majority of tools for Kali Linux will not be able to be sourced directly. We'll need to import some BlackArch repositories, and the way that we'll do that is to do it through a special strap command. So in order to get strapped with all these BlackArch tools, we can actually use a one-line command to download and install all the various modules that BlackArch has to offer. Now you can see there is a lot of stuff that I need to install just to do this, but just so you guys see how the Pacman installation tool works, I'm going to go through with it and expand this. So you can see the exact same size desktop window. I'll just bring it back. There you go. All right, so now we have AirCrackNG installed on this computer, but for the more advanced stuff, let's go ahead and try to download via a curl command, and I'll do this to, no, I'll just do it where I am in the home directory. Oh, so one thing that you need to do in order to make this work is make sure to make it executable. So I just, as you saw, attempted to execute it and it didn't work. So if you want to make it executable, you can type sudo chmod +x and then strap.sh. All right, now let's go ahead and try to run it. All right, here we go. So after a little bit of trial and error, the correct command is sudo./strap.sh. Cool. So this will install the BlackArch keyring, which will basically give us everything we need to install tools that are included in BlackArch. Now, this won't be installing the tools themselves. This will just be basically the location of where the tools are. So when we run the individual installations for the type of tools we want to get or an individual tool, it will reach out and go and install it. So keep in mind, this isn't installing everything right now. So even though it runs pretty quickly, that doesn't mean we have everything that we need. It just means we can go out and find it when we want to install it. Now that we're actually able to install packages, it's important to show you the right way to do so, because if you do it the wrong way, first it just straight up won't work, and second, you can actually damage the system later on. So if we run this command to basically try to install all of the BlackArch-drone category, this will include a lot of different stuff if we do the default selection of all. So by doing this, you can see we're going to be installing 638 megabytes of different programs to the disk, which is a lot and will take quite some time if you have a slow internet connection. Now, I've already cached these, so it'll go a lot faster, but after this finishes attempting to install, you'll notice that it actually fails. And this is going to be really frustrating if you decide to do the entire BlackArch repository and then end up getting faced with this screen that says, hey, we actually didn't do anything. So the reason this happens is there's a bunch of different files that are now claimed by both different repositories, the BlackArch repository and by Manjaro. Now when it tries to update, this will cause conflicts that ultimately can make the system very unstable. So rather than going through and doing it this way, which by adding tac force would allow us to actually force Pacman to do this, we're going to do this the right way and instead add lowercase g to our Pacman tac s, which will give us a a list of all the various programs we can install. Now, if we want to see a more descriptive view, we can add lowercase s instead, and here you can see there's a description of what the tool is and kind of what it can be used on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just pick one of these last ones. Let's say Zulu. And in order to install this, the way to do so would be Pacman tac s, and then, in this case, BlackArch/Zulu. Press enter and then press Y to proceed with the installation. And there you go. This has installed a BlackArch tool to our Manjaro installation just fine by first adding the BlackArch repository. While Manjaro is an easy and user-friendly interface to get to know Arch Linux, there are some limitations with the method that we've laid out. In particular, as you begin to upgrade and add new packages, there can be some real conflicts between the BlackArch repositories and the Manjaro ones, eventually leading to an operating system that can become unstable. If you really want to get into learning Arch Linux, I recommend that you install Arch the traditional way eventually, but this will provide you with lots and lots of easy to use tools that you can access kind of the same way that you would expect to use Kali Linux. If you have any problems setting it up, you can check out the Null Byte article linked in the description if you need any help troubleshooting. That's all we have for this episode of Cyber Weapons Lab. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for future episodes, send me a message on Twitter because I'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.